Welcome back to the Kudlow Report. Larry Kudlow. In this half hour, let's take an optimistic view of consumer spending and retail sales. Pretty good over Thanksgiving weekend. But now comes the Washington challenge, which may again ride roughshod over American optimism. That is later. But first up, just 35 days until the nation's economy plummets off the tax and fiscal cliff. Is Congress any closer to finding common ground? Let's get right to our special guest, Oklahoma Republican Senator Tom Coburn. He's the author of The Debt Bomb. Welcome back, Senator Coburn. You know, Senator, is it possible, I mean, this is a big question here at CNBC, is it possible to rise above the partisanship, number one, and number two, this is my own kibitz, to produce a deal that would help the country and help the country grow? Is such a good deal, not a bad deal?
No, I think that's possible. Larry, the one thing that all the media today, I've done a lot of interviews, and all last week, they're wanting to talk about taxes. You can't raise taxes big enough to solve this problem. I don't care where you go to get them. If you don't significantly, structurally reform entitlements, you can't fix this problem. And so with the news media all centered on tax increases rather than the real problem, because you can take everybody over $100,000 a year and take everything that they made over that and confiscate it all, and you're not going to come close to solving this problem. So we ought to be talking about the realistic goals of the president. What is your plan for entitlement reform? Boehner has said we'll put revenues on the table. How we do it is important in terms of getting pro-growth tax reform. But you got to reform entitlements. And if you don't do that, you haven't solved the problem. And it doesn't matter how good a pro-growth tax reform we get, if you don't have significant entitlement reform.
Right.
We're not going to solve the problem.
But what about,
and we'll be right back here.
I mean, look, I totally agree with you on entitlement reform. From what I gather, Senate Democrats, the leadership, they are opposed to entitlement reform. They are opposed to any reduction in Medicare and Social Security. But I want to ask you about another spending issue. Initially, we were supposed to have an across-the-board budget cut called the sequester of $1.2 trillion over 10 years. Where's that gone? That's about $100 billion a year. I'd say that make a pretty good down payment on deficits and debt. What's getting my goat is everybody's talking revenues. What happened to the sequester?
That's right. And there's $750 billion yet to go on that based on what we've done so far. And I think the president will have a tough time getting through the Republican House and Republicans in the Senate if, in fact, you don't have equivalent numbers to that in terms of the discretionary cuts. I mean, sequester is not a good idea, but sequester is a great idea versus no spending cuts whatsoever.
Right. There you go. I mean, originally, some people were saying 3 to 4 to 1 spending cuts to revenue increases. What I'm saying is, you know, maybe $1 of spending cuts to $5 of revenue increases. They got the whole thing backwards. And basically what I want to ask you on this is, how can anybody talk about raising taxes? I don't care how. Limiting deductions, whatever. How can anybody talk about the T word until they've milked every bit of spending cuts possible? I mean, you've written boodles and bundles of stuff on it that they won't touch. It seems to me until that spending rock is bled dry, we should never talk about taxes.
Well, that's a whole different issue, Larry. Career politicians are very verbose when it comes to saying they're for cutting spending. They're very specific when they say the programs they want to fund, but you can't find hardly a one that wants to be specific about what they want to cut, because the conflict is staying in office versus doing what's best for the country. And so therefore we find ourselves in a dilemma, sometimes with Republicans and Democrats, both, that they won't make the hard choices for the betterment of the country. They'll make the hard choices only if they benefit their political careers.
What about?
And so we've lived the last 30 years off the next 30. The bill's due. We can't get another credit card. The bill is due. Now, how do we get this solved?
Well, you're looking for common ground, are you not? I mean, you are.
I am, and I'm okay with revenue increases, as long as you don't destroy our ability to reform the tax code, which will stimulate additional growth, which will stimulate additional revenues. Right. But raising the rate's a political game. The fact is we got $30 billion a year in the tax code that the very, very wealthy take advantage of. We could do a whole lot with that by reforming the tax code that would cause the formation of greater capital, greater investment, greater economic growth, and ultimately greater revenues. And what I'm worried about is the short-term thinkers in Washington would rather have a little pea in your pod right now rather than a whole roll of green beans 2 years from now.
All right, let me ask you one more that seems very disturbing to me. I am reading everywhere that Senator Harry Reid wants to severely curtail and restrain the minority's power to filibuster. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I would just tell you that the Senate, when I got here, the Senate worked very well. Everybody could offer amendments. They were respectful of the amendments they offered. They knew if they took advantage of it, there would be consequences in terms of people not voting for their amendments. We've lost quality leadership in the Senate, and Harry Reid's answer to that is change the rules. And if he changes the rules, he will have totally defeated our founders' purpose of creating a Senate where minority rights are protected. And what that will do is that'll create two houses of Congress rather than a House and a Senate, and it just says majority rules with an iron fist.
So you're going to fight it. You're going to fight it.
Well, I would tell you, my hope would be that if he carries out his threat, the Senate will be shut down until he restores the rights of the minority. Because that's what our founders intended. The reason they did a bicameral legislature and set it up to protect minority rights in the Senate was so that it would force compromise. And what he's saying is, I don't have the skills to get compromise, so therefore it's either my way or the highway.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Senator Coburn, good luck on everything. Good luck on the filibuster.
Thank you. God bless you, Larry.
Good luck on the whole fiscal cliff.
You bet.
All right, just to add on to Senator Coburn's remarks, my version of Rise Above starts with spending cuts, and that includes entitlements, which are the real problems. You know, at least